welcome to the ingathering. Welcome to the waning half moon. The moon is waning right now. If you look up in the sky, it's going to look like this image right here. And this is always when we meet at the ingatherings. This is the time of the month, every month, where the moon shifts from the bright half into the darker half, which we're going to be talking a lot about. And when the moon shifts from her bright half to her darker half every month, we reserve the right to go within and connect within and connect with each other from that internal space. The plan for today is to begin with connecting a little bit deeper with ourselves and with each other. And then I'm going to provide some zooming out context of what is currently occurring with respect to the seasonal shifts, this special day that we have today. And then I'm going to offer some information and vibratory attunement to the particular kind of energy that is present at this time. And then we're going to tie that into what we've been learning about revolutionary process. And I'm going to explain what that means for our new folks. And then the most important part, we practice the craft of resonance. So that means that we are actively tuning into the truth within ourselves and within each other, sharing that energetic accordance and magnifying it within each other and within ourselves, actually practicing that. So that's the plan for today. And before we dig into all of that content, let's take a breath. Let's take a moment to feel into the breath. Feel how it moves within you. Feel how the inhale is continuous with the exhale. Feel the elasticity in your spine as we drop in to right here. Try to feel into the center of your breath and explore what that means. In the center of your chest, into your heart space, in the center of that movement, that ebbing and flowing, and held in that safe center. We are safe. We're in the loving arms of the wise teacher within. We came all the way from stardust, breath by breath, to be exactly here together. Thank you for honoring the call, and welcome to the revolution. Because this time of the year, the light is returning. Every morning, the dawn dawns a little earlier, and every night, the sun lingers a little longer before setting. And this matters to us. As humans, this matters to us. The changing of the seasons is just one of many, many cycles in nature of which we are an inextricable part. And our breath, this is a delicate, constant, and intimate teacher. Our breath teaches us so much. Everything that is breathing. The rhythms of nature are what we are. That is what we are, the breathingness of nature, the frequency of these fluctuations is what we are. Now, again, let's return to the breath here and explore the relationship between the inhale and the exhale. As you're breathing, just notice what's happening in your body. Notice the expansion and the release. Notice how the air is drawn in from all around you, right into you. Notice how the external moves into you. Notice the transition between the inhale and the exhale. Explore how it expresses from within. Where there's effort or lack of effort. exploring that exchange. And you share your breath. You are literally sharing your breath, these molecules that you're taking in and expressing. You are sharing your breath with everything. You are sharing your breathingness with everything. You are exchanging with the whole world with every breath. And we're in good company in doing that too, because everything, not just living things, everything is doing an ebb and flow. Everything is doing a breathing in its own way and in its own rate. So the season swells from springtime to the zenith of summertime and releasing into autumn to the very bottom of the breath at wintertime. So this is a graphic that we see a lot at these ingatherings. This represents the expansion and the return. So I have a couple cycles indicated here. This graphic of the waxing half moon with spring, the waxing moon, the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle, expanding into summertime, the full moon and ovulation before declining, decreasing into autumn, the waning moon, the luteal phase, all the way down to the bottom with winter, new moon, and menstruation. And we look at these changes, these cycles, we look at these things during these ingathering sessions as a cycle. It is. It's cyclical. One thing happens, the next thing happens, and then it goes back. The inhale always precedes and follows the exhale and vice versa. And cycles can be represented as a circle, and also cycles can be represented linearly. So we can follow along this sine wave here, rising on the inhale up towards the crest of summertime, releasing down all the way on the exhale. There's an obvious here with obviously and intuitively, we're increasing on the inhale, going down on the exhale. So we recently crossed the spring equinox. We're on the other side of the spring equinox now, and we're rising. We're on the rising edge of this cresting wave. So at this time of year, when we tune in to the energies that are happening in nature, at this time of year, we're leaning into our expansion. It's time seasonally for our energies to rise. This is the time of year where we emerge from the darkness of wintertime and step into the light. And as we rise to the light, let's take a moment and get clear on exactly what it is that we're rising from and what it is that we're stepping into. So just like everything has an inhale and an exhale, everything has a masculine energy and a feminine energy. So masculine energy includes outward expression, individuation, and specification, and the awareness of the differences between things. So that's analytical distinguishment. Analysis separates things, it distinguishes things. And feminine energy is an inward return to source where specificity is released into universality, and there are themes of integration and synthesis rather than analysis. Synthesis brings things together. Analysis distinguishes the differences between things. And while the breath is continuous, as we've experienced, there is a difference between the inhale and the exhale. So it's paradoxically one in the same and also distinct. And the inhale doesn't mean anything without the exhale. The exhale doesn't mean anything without the inhale. They exist relationally, and this is how it is with masculine and feminine energy. They are distinct, but they're inexplicably interrelated. And just to be clear, this is not the same thing as men and women or sex and gender or anything like that. Everything has both poles of this way of seeing, this way of expressing cyclical energetic expression. So we can see here, over here, we crossed the vernal equinox, and as we reach towards the summer solstice, we're in the masculine half of the year. We've crossed into the masculine half of the year, but at these ingatherings, we always meet at the waning half moon. That's when the moon looks like this. That's the time of the month that we're transitioning from the masculine, expansive half of the month into the internal, reflective time of the month. So we're balancing this yearly outward expansion and this monthly return within. And we go deep. On this half of the month, this is when we go deep. Those of us who experience menstrual cycles, you know what it's like when you're crossing into that luteal phase. You know that experience going within and just retreating from the external world. And we've talked before at these gatherings that our culture, our society tends to encourage us to just always be expanding, just always be producing. And that's part of capitalism, that's part of grind culture, that's part of the patriarchy, where it's that masculine outward expansion, which is wonderful in relationship with the feminine. But when it is without the feminine, it goes off the rails and it can be really, really hard. Like, and so this is why PMS is is challenging in my opinion of things, my assessment on the situation. PMS is challenging because it is incongruous with the perpetual expansion of the patriarchy and the culture that we live with. So that's why following the rhythms of nature, identifying as those rhythms, those cycles in nature, is revolutionary. And this isn't just supportive to us and our own practice. This is supportive of creating a new culture where the inhale and the exhale participate together. So this is us right now. We are at this point. We are at the waning half moon at these ingatherings. And that's why they're called ingatherings. The moon, it indicates when it is time to draw our energies back in. Mabon, the autumnal equinox, has been called the feast of ingathering. So at this point in the month, we are doing this ingathering. And at this point of ingathering, this is when the external expression comes to be returned to release all of these individuated masculine expressions throughout the month or throughout the year return to the feminine at the point of ingathering. When it returns to that feminine half of the month or the year, that's when those things are released. They release their form. This is like composting. At the autumnal equinox, the leaves fall and they turn to earth. That's what happens in the feminine part of the year. We're bringing things back into the earth. Every month, we do this every month, and at the autumnal equinox, that phase happens every year. And this also happens in every breath. And when form is released, that is a kind of death. The individuated, encapsulated expression that was born comes to die. The boundaries of the specific individuation softens and returns to the quiet, fertile potential from which anything new can be born. So death is of the feminine. It's in death that we are returned to the formless, the unnamed, and the infinite. It's in the tomb of the feminine that we are once again in the womb of the feminine, returned to the stem cells of menstrual blood to be reborn as absolutely anything. That's what happens in that dark part of the year, of the breath, of the month. It does include death. Death is in the feminine part of the year. So this is resurrection. Resurrection comes from death, and it looks like growth. It looks like birth, but it absolutely, necessarily comes from death. And the mysteries of the womb, and that's womb with a W, and the mysteries of the tomb, that's tomb with a T, are hidden. This is necessarily so. We cannot make visible the invisible and expect it to be the same thing. It becomes something else. It's right and good and necessary for these mysteries to be unseen, to be mysterious. And there is not a speculum in the world that can make unseen magic seen. That would turn it into a visible expression that would effectively end the time in the womb and the tomb and the unknown. So it has to exist unknown. So, what we're describing is essentially the observer effect, which explains the necessity of unobservability as a fact of quantum reality. So, light is both a particle and a wave. So, this dates back to 1801 in the double slit experiment, which sent light through two slits. So, over here, like imagine that all of this is water. If you dropped a pebble into the water right here, it would make these perfect concentric circles. And then if it hit a wall where there were two gaps and the water could go through, this is what it would do. This is a predictable wave pattern. And then where these nodal points are, that's what makes the interference pattern on this back wall. The interference pattern would only show up if light is a wave. This is what waves look like when they're hitting a wall. This is the nodal pattern that the interference would make. Light is a wave. Light is a wave. But light is also a particle. Imagine that instead of water all around here, instead of water all around, this is a firing squad over here and sending a bunch of bullets all the way across. Like what's going to happen on the back wall here? It's not going to be an interference pattern. It's going to be a bunch of bullets hitting right here and a bunch of bullets hitting right here. That would form two lines. So here's the fascinating part. When scientists turned on the measuring equipment and the equipment was running, the experiment was under observation, we got the two-line pattern every time. We got the bullet strike pattern every time. But when the experiment was conducted without observations and the results were looked at after the experiment was finished, that's when we see the wave interference patterns. So the wave-like nature of light, the wave-like nature, the cyclical nature, the fluid nature of light is feminine. That is its feminine occult aspect. It cannot be observed, otherwise it acts in its observable masculine fashion. And the word occult simply means covered or hidden. The feminine is occult. It is the eternal unknowable. And humans often fear the unknown. And humans tend to vilify what they fear. So this pattern of that's unknown, I'm afraid, and that's evil and bad has occurred with respect to many, many, many aspects of feminine energy, not just women, but certainly women, also death and mystery, the wild earth, nature itself, throughout history and throughout the world. Death and feminine energy are necessarily occult. And that's a good thing. That's necessary and that's a good thing. That's a beautiful part of the magic of feminine energy, the transformative power. But that is not the same thing as evil. In the Christian tradition, today is Easter. Happy Easter. This day marks Jesus' resurrection from the dead into life everlasting. And we can look at this in several ways. We could look at it as death, and by association, the feminine is unknowable and therefore scary and therefore evil and bad, and avoiding all of this messiness would be much more preferable. Just avoid the unknown, no more untidiness. Let's have eternal sunshine, nonstop masculine day. This is the good thing. So hooray for the triumph over death, down with the feminine, no more death, resurrection is a good time, we can live in masculine light forever. That could be a way to look at it. And that's a little bit of hyperbole, a little bit of hyperbole. And while I personally find a lot of value in Christ-based spirituality, and we are going to dive into that. It's also true that Christianity as an institution has been used to systematically and aggressively eradicate the Cathars, those who were practicing feminine energy-based spirituality, the eradication of Muslims throughout the Crusades in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries, the Spanish Inquisition up to the 15th century, the European witch hunts in the 15th and all the way through to the 18th centuries. Most of those witch hunts were mostly targeting women for practicing herbal medicine, midwifery, or just being unmarried. So Christianity has also been used to justify the manifest destiny in the United States, effectively contributing to the displacement and tremendous oppression of Native Americans, as well as slavery of Black Africans. So when we're looking at the subtle themes here, I want to be clear that there is a difference between a spiritual path of Christ and how these powerful teachings, stories, and histories have been used to leverage and maintain control. So yeah, there is a little bit of hyperbole, and also like that may actually have been the intention from which some institutions have used the resurrection story to vilify and devalue the magic of the feminine and the true power of the interplay between life and death that happens in the feminine realm. I think we can imagine here like why some of those institutions would want to spread the vilification of feminine energy and the power that comes there, because that's real power. This power of life and death is real power. So I think we can imagine why it would feel threatening and why it would feel appealing to suppress that awareness. So I honor that this has been happening, and I honor that we've all suffered from our participation in the resurrection story in this way. I'm a I'm a white American. Like Christianity, I was raised Christian. Christianity is a part of my culture, and I think it's reasonable to say that Christianity, including the resurrection story, has been used oppressively, not exclusively, but oppressively. It has been used oppressively, I feel that we feel that as a culture. And I also think that there is another way to tell this resurrection story. And maybe the new way of telling the story of resurrection includes liberation from that one-way dead-end street where we live in futile, defensive fear of the other side, of our own breathing. This is our breath that we've been afraid of. And you can only get so much power from just trying to inhale all day long. You can breathe a whole lot more air if you exhale as well. You can keep breathing. You can keep breathing if you're not believing that if you exhale, that's the end. So maybe it's that limited, futile way of trying to live in a way that isn't life, which is always ebbing and flowing, which is always cyclical. Maybe it's that limited, futile way of trying to live without life that actually needs to come to die and end and change and be reborn. While participating in one of my personal favorite Easter time ritual traditions, which is watching the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar, I'm always struck by a line that says, "To conquer death, you only need to die." The limited self does need to die and be returned to the gentle feminine arms of compost in order for the true living self, the living self, to be born and to rise. The limited self is insecure and is always hungry because it has cut itself off from its connection to the bountiful, infinite supply of the nourishing breasts of the earth and communion with one another. So the limited self is scared. And we can have compassion for that too. We can have compassion for the limited self that is afraid to die, that has tried to build a life without living where it doesn't have to face the death, which it truly believes is scary. We can have compassion for that. We can have anger about it too. We can have anger about the oppression, and we can also have compassion for that place of fear that we've all experienced in this lifetime, in past lifetimes, at different points. We can have compassion for that fearful, limited self. The resurrection is gratefully and gracefully born from death and is sustained in eternal life because it finally sees that it is breathing itself, the breathingness itself that is life. It's the divine relationship between the masculine and the feminine that is the turbine that makes the whole cosmos spin. And this view of the resurrection is part of the revolution. The revolution, as I define it, is the wave of awakening energy that's flowing through humanity and rocking our lives and our world in challenging and transformative ways. And when we choose again and again to let go of the old paradigms and step into the truth of our being as one with each other and one with our source and one with all things. In quantum entanglement, we are literally one with all things. We step into the truth of our power as creative beings. We are walking the path of the death and resurrection mysteries. So following, leaning into this new way of thinking of the resurrection as an interconnection between the masculine and feminine, as stepping into the cyclical breathingness of living is revolutionary. The one needs the other needs the one. The inhale needs the exhale loves the inhale. And the hero's journey always goes into the unknown. It's when the fool becomes the journeyman and in facing the fear of the unknown becomes the wise wizard. And when that wisdom is honored and placed on the throne, that's when the kingdom appears. It's through the baptism, through the trial, through the cave of the womb, and through the unknown, through the death, that one is born anew and christened the anointed one. Christ means the anointed one who has been christened, one who has gone through the baptism, one who has gone through the journey of death and rebirth, who has gone through the hero's journey, who has gone through the transformative process of the womb tomb of the unknown. So in this way, Christ is one who has been blessed by the journey through the feminine rituals of death and rebirth. It is the association with the feminine that Christ becomes Christed, that anyone becomes Christed. Christ is simply the one who knows the truth of who they are. That they are not separate from each other, from source, from the movements of death and life. It doesn't get any more revolutionary than Christ consciousness. That's fully knowing your truth and living it and acting it. So Jesus was teaching others not to follow him, but to become as he is. Not to create followers, not to create disciples, but to create Christs. So we are called into that cave, and that's why we're here. That's why things like in gathering, things like coming together to talk about revolution and resurrection, that's why we're drawn to these things, because we are called into that cave. We are called to be blessed through the feminine rituals and to be reborn, fully knowing ourselves as of eternal life, being born into fully knowing ourselves as that breathingness that our truth is. Everything is energy and vibration. Everything is energy and vibration. Everything is breathing. And it's in that breathingness that life is everlasting. It's in this knowing that we step into the light. That's what is stepping into the light. So this is not the eradication of death, which is the necessary and vital process. It's the necessary and vital process of death and the inclusion and the marriage of both poles of breathing, the mutually reverent marriage of expansion and release, of inhale and exhale, the marriage of this that is life everlasting. This is one interrelated breathing experience. We are one interrelated breathing experience. The inhale loves the exhale loves the inhale. I'm willing to know you. I am of you. I return to you. I am yours and you are mine, and we are one in our breathing. We are. It is, and I am, and we are one in our breathing. Christ consciousness is a frequency. It is a breathing current that can be tuned into like any radio station. We are built to receive frequencies. We are built to receive frequencies of truth above all. We can play the trash radio stations. We can and we do, and we've gotten used to it. But we are designed to receive and to share, to express the frequencies that are true. And the vibration that is Christness is fully anointed via the feminine mysteries of death and birth and the sexual interplay that is required in the breathing, loving embrace of the inhale and exhale in these energies. So the consciousness of Christness is living as alive, not towards the limited terminus of a fearful avoidance, but towards the inevitable and miraculous regeneration of the feminine mysteries, fully breathing both the inhale and the exhale. So let's return again to the teacher of our breath like we did in the beginning. Let's breathe deep. We die and we are reborn in each breath. Feel your resurrection on the inhale in reverence of the exhale that it came from. Enter into the mystery of the unknown on the exhale. Let it die. Any limitation, any fear, any grasping for power that could only exist in isolation from your true source. Let it die. That's not your power. There is no power in that fearful terminus. Inhale into the true power of the divine marriage between the expression and the reception. We release the bondage of living without both aspects of our breath. We release the bondage of living in fear of what is deep and warm and unknowable and magical in its mystery. We breathe into the surrender and the wisdom that comes from that surrender. We breathe into welcoming the release of what has held us back, held us apart from each other, and held us paralyzed in fear. We breathe into the resurrection as we welcome our anointing again and again and breathe into the union of inhale and exhale. We breathe into awareness that we are the inhale, we are the exhale, we are the lover and the beloved. We breathe as we set down our fear, set down our animosity, and emerge in love and knowing in our true form, united, alive, Christed, and free. We breathe and arise, welcomed into the light of our resurrection, our union, and our revolution.